Hello, everybody. I'm Kim Tavares. I'm the Executive Director of the Miami University Alumni Association, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our first virtual Miami at the Merc. Miami at the Merc is an enrichment event that is typically held in downtown Cincinnati at the Mercantile Library. But today, we're excited to extend this reach beyond our usual Cincinnati audience to a huge group of Miamians gathered here from around the country and from the classes of 1962 up to 2024. We have faculty, staff, students, parents, and friends joining us today. So thank you to all of you who submitted questions ahead of time, and just wanted you to know you can also participate live. You can feel free to ask a question using the Ask a Question button below your video, and we'll try to get to your question during our broadcast today. I do have just a few quick acknowledgements, and then we'll go ahead and turn it over to our panel. So first of all, thank you, of course, to our moderator and our panelists for sharing their valuable time with all of us today. I want to thank my team at the Miami University Alumni Association for working to get this content together and uniting our Miamians during this time with the virtual content. And finally, I want to thank Walter Frank and the Mikki and Walter Frank Family Charitable Fund for providing the vision for the Professional Enrichment Series and financial support for us to continue it. And now I'm thrilled to introduce today's moderator. Barnali Gupta is the Associate Dean for Curriculum and Professor of Economics in the Farmer School of Business at Miami. And we're very lucky to have Dr. Gupta joining us today, as it was just recently announced that she will be the Edward Jones Dean of the Richard A. Chaffetz School of Business at St. Louis University, a role that she will begin in January. So Barnali, you're a great economics professor. I know that from MBA experience, and a wonderful leader. So it's really congratulations to you on this new role. We're very excited for you. And I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Kim. And welcome, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to be here and to discuss this important topic with our distinguished alumni panel. The impact of the pandemic on female labor force participation is being documented in real time. Conversations like this one are so important to keep us engaged and informed. And on that note, it is my distinct honor to introduce our incredible alumni panel that brings a vast scale and scope of talent and experience. Let me begin with Kay Geiger. Kay graduated from Miami in 1978, earning her bachelor's in business with a major in marketing. Kay has served on the Farmer School of Business Dean's Advisory Board, the Miami University Board of Trustees, as well as the Foundation Board. Kay is the regional president of PNC Bank in Cincinnati. Kay, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Joy Harper. Joy is a 2002 Miami graduate with a double major in accountancy and Black World Studies. Joy is deeply involved with multiple finance and philanthropy organizations, including board service and nonprofit leadership. Joy is a finance principal at Google in San Francisco. Joy, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Our final panelist is Jeneen Marziani. Jeneen is a 1993 Miami graduate with a major in speech communications. Jeneen serves on the advisory board for the College of Arts and Sciences, among other volunteer leadership roles. Jeneen is the market president for Ohio at Bank of America in Cleveland. Jeneen, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
For being here. Our topic this afternoon is advancing women in finance. In this discussion on gender equality in the workplace, the focus is on why the financial industry has not kept pace with some other professional fields, and how can we advance the role of women in finance? Kay, the first question is for you. Can you share with our audience your ideas for how the financial sector can more effectively attract women? Also, addressing what drew you to this industry.
Thank you, and congratulations, Barnali. I think the first thing we have to do is to continue to provide role models. And the financial services industry, it's a big segment. In fact, 50% of the industry is women. I think there will be some dichotomies as we go through our conversation together, is that while it's 50% of the workforce in financial services, it's only 22% currently, but growing in senior leadership. One of the things I think we can say as proud Miami alum is that Miami is leading the pack in this. Miami has had one of the strongest business schools and frankly, recruiting for financial services industries. I'm sure we can speak to all of our respective organizations, is probably one of our highest attraction for students. Miami has just incredibly strong curriculum in all of their colleges that we recruit from. Now, we're going to speak from the business school perspective today, but there are a multitude, I mean a multitude, and probably where we as an industry need to improve for your question. There are so many various distinct career paths in financial services. It is highly technology driven. It is highly data driven. It is highly security driven, and finance and accounting and all what people naturally think. I know that the industry has been working, and trying to make sure that when recruiting happens and you want to know about a career in financial services, it's not just, I want to be an investment banker. Or in some cases now with tech firms, there is a high degree in demand for finance, backgrounds. I think the bigger conversation that might be helpful is the industry. There's insurance, there's real estate, there's investment management. I think one of the most interesting parts of needing to attract women into finance and the business is over 47% of the finances of households, if not more, are done by women. That's $22 trillion are in the capacity of women making decisions. It's a very important career and a very important industry to be in. And frankly, there's a lot of leadership and relationship skills that benefit. I think in addition to having universities, we need to go back farther in what we're doing in high schools. So pre-career education, I think, is important. I know STEM programs have been doing that for a while, but finance is no different. The degree of options in finance needs to be widened in that pre-career conversation in high schools. We, for instance, at PNC realized that we couldn't understand why there was somewhat of a myth about finance professions. And so we started a commercial banking club, which many of the banks participate. And it's really about awareness. It's about mentoring and advocacy, which we'll talk about more maybe on retention and promotion later. But I think it's really it's the one-to-one intentional outreach and understanding. How did I end up in this? Well, it kind of speaks to what we need to do better. And that is, I was introduced to banking by a professor, Dr. Jones. I'll never forget it, my international business professor. And he said, I want you to go interview at this bank. And I'm like, a bank? I want to go into global, I want to work for a multinational. I had a language backgrounds and a long, reason why I wanted to be an international business. He said, no, I want you to go interview. So I did it. I don't know. I guess I wanted to make sure I got a good grade in his class. So I did him a favor. No, just kidding. I actually did this. And I was so surprised. And the myth immediately went away once I took that first job. And I realized this is an incredible opportunity. It fits all the things I want. I want to be in the people business. I want to have deep technical skills that I have to use from my degrees. I wanted to really be able to just have a diverse, all kinds of customers, all kinds of economy, So it's a very, very rich and intellectually challenging, lifelong learning place to be. So I'm very much about advocating for women being in this area.
Okay, thank you. You touched on many important opportunities in the field. I'm going to quickly go to Joy and Jeneen. Do you have any quick follow-ups here for our audience?
Just the one follow-up I would have is I think panels like this are super important because it highlights that there are women in finance. And I think there's a myth that there aren't any women in finance. I mean, I work for a company and the CFO is a woman. She was the CFO at her other company. Look at Kay, look at Jeneen. There are plenty of women in finance. And I think women who are currently in finance, not that we have an obligation, but it's great when we highlight ourselves and highlight our colleagues. I feel like I've had a great career in finance. And I went to Miami of Ohio with one of my best friends from high school, who's also in finance. She works at Fifth Third. And so I think just highlighting that we are here and that we're here for mentorship, we're here for sponsorship. I think that's one way of attracting more women into finance. Like Kay mentioned, some of the STEM programs that have cropped up all over the place are really helpful getting women into STEM, but I think there's more work to be done on the finance side. And like Kay said, it's so diverse: asset management, investment banking, being in-house, being at a commercial bank, private banking, wealth management. It's just a diverse career opportunities in finance, not that you have to be a finance major. So just highlighting that. And even Dr. Gupta yourself, professors have huge influence when you're an undergrad. My professors had huge influence. Bill Madison, huge influence on my career. He was a finance major, and he pushed me and my friend who's also in finance to stay in the business school. So kudos to all the professors at Miami in the business school. I think it's one of the best in the country, and it really did solidify my career in finance, and even just the connections I still have today with other alumni keeps me in the industry and keeps me in finance.
Yeah, and I would really echo what Joy and Kay talked about. I actually did not see myself at all in business or finance. I actually started when I was getting ready to graduate. I had heard about this company called Bank of America, and when I started doing interviews, and I really hadn't thought about exploring it. And when I had my interview there, it just felt like home to me. And so what I would say and encourage you to do is don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone. And I do feel like it was a place that, as Joy and Kay talked about, there are so many, diversity of thought, diversity of jobs. When you think about working capital and what we can do, you're helping small businesses, you're helping homeowners have their first home, students be able to go to college. So when you think about giving people dreams and hopes and all of those types of things, when you're helping communities in need, I really do feel like sometimes people look at finance as, is it something that's really warm? And yes, I do believe it really is when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of this is what makes not only America work, but the world. And so when you think about the meaningful contributions you can make in society, this is one way to do it. And so I do think that for me, that's where I felt like this is a place that I can call home. It's the only place I've worked with since I've been since I left Miami, and it's because of the diversity of the jobs and the experience and the rich experience I think I got at Miami. Clearly, the professors, I think the education, it clearly gave me an opportunity to raise my voice, and I knew it was a place that would listen to me, even as a place of where I was just starting out. And I think that's the big thing that I would also encourage too. Voice is so critical. And when you think about the economic and the pandemic that's going on right now, we do need people that speak up and take that opportunity to really drive those changes. So I think it's an incredible opportunity. And even though it may not every place you go within the bank or the finance industry may look like you are that trailblazer. And so I think that that's one of the great things for women in finance is we're not afraid of challenges, and you can break down the barriers to get even greater inroads. Are we happy with only 50%? No, we'd like to have more than that. So, I mean, I think there's, clearly opportunities, and we're looking for that next generation to mentor. And I think, even people that are in school or people that are out of school, we got to continue to pull each other up. And I think that's what's kept me in finance is I have always had people, and it's women and men, if people of many racial backgrounds, whether or not their sexual orientation, people have pulled us along. And I think we've all found people along the career. And so I would encourage other people to do that too, to lift people up and across.
Terrific insights. Thank you. Moving on to our second question, Joy. As we know well, retention of talent is a critical marker of success in the endeavor for a more diverse workforce. Can you share with our audience your experience on this topic and what keeps you engaged in this field?
Yeah, so I think retention, one of the things that's kept me in the field, I'll start there, then I can talk a little bit about retention, is, as Jeneen mentioned, my mentors and sponsors. So I have friends who are in finance. I worked in public accounting for over a decade, and I had so many great mentors. I started my career in Cleveland, Ohio. I worked for some amazing partners, men and women, and they like pulled me along the way. I mean, I started very young. I was an intern at Ernst & Young in Cleveland. And had it not been for some really key partners and one of the women in HR who actually works for Bank of America now, very instrumental in the early years of my career. And that pushed me along to take other opportunities within the firm and work on big financial services clients. So I started in Cleveland. One of the partners encouraged me to do a rotation in Washington, D.C. I moved there, spent some time in the capital markets industry, learning a bit more about that, which is super interesting. Then took another opportunity based on very senior women in the Washington, D.C. office, pushing me to do an international rotation in London. And even then, once I got to London, again, very strong mentors and very strong sponsors who helped me land a great opportunity here in San Francisco, which led me into proper financial services working for BlackRock. And I want to call out BlackRock because they had a very strong women's network, which I think helped with retention. And they talked a lot about retention. And you can talk about retention a lot, but one of the keys to retention, I think we'll get to that as well, is promotion. So if you hire talent, if you hire key talent, one of the ways to retain them is putting them on great projects, giving them interesting work. And for those who are interested, finding ways to promote them, whether it's in the role that they're in, moving outside of like their current role, moving to a different product area, depending, if you're in a US multinational, or just expanding, taking on more leadership roles. So I've been very fortunate throughout my career. I'm still fortunate. I work for an amazing company. I work for an amazing boss. I'm fortunate enough in my current role to have several women VPs that I can talk to at any time about my career. I mean, we are very fortunate that we have like 5 or 6, and I probably have the count off, which is a bit not rare, but I think, as Kay mentioned, like we are getting to the point where we're seeing women in leadership roles in finance. I think when I first started it, Deloitte, I think, started a program a while ago to focusing on women in leadership and women in finance. And I'm seeing the benefits of that now. I'm being pushed to take on more responsibility and look for new opportunities. So I think I think the key to retention for me has been strong mentorship, strong sponsorship, and opportunity to just grow. And I think that would help any person in their career, man or woman, or whatever gender you identify as.
Excellent insights, Joy. Thank you. Kay, Jeneen.
Yeah. I think it wouldn't be a surprise at a Miami event, but there's always a point where you think, I knew we'd get to that 1 degree of separation. And so in hearing Joy speak and Jeneen speak, first of all, the professors and the role models. I mean, we have a new dean of the Farmer School of Business Jenny Derrick. I've long known Lisa Dankovich, who is in charge of economic development and community outreach for Miami, that just brings the whole community of Cincinnati. I know this is all across the country, so hello to all the Miami alum. But I think that the point about retention is it goes with the same thing we talked about on recruitment. The ability to use a network of Miami alumni is phenomenal. Joy, we at PNC, we were one of the founders and largest owners of BlackRock for many years. So there's our 1 degree of separation, and I'm sure there'll be more. But the point about retention, I think, right now was well stated by Jeneen and Joy, is that since I started in finance, the C-suite has tripled. And it's still, it's only less than, a fifth of the leadership. But the point is we have to really bring, and it is an obligation, I think, to bring others along, whether it's just explaining what finance is and the industry and the opportunities. But I think when you really enter the workforce at whatever point you do, and whatever, maybe you shifted and pivoted out of something into finance, is that the culture of the organization is so key. And organizations that are really taking ground on this are ones that are being very, very intentional and inclusive. I don't think you can end up with a diverse workforce unless you start with inclusive, and what that basically means is you belong. And the way you do that is with mentors and advocates. And I'm a big believer that it's not the one mentor. And frankly, I just think advocates, what that means is you're getting a perspective. They know who you are, and you have to be just open-minded. That, the key to retention, I think, for yourself personally, is if you're going to be, a leader in the organization, you want to have other opportunities, is to always be curious and have that incredible open-mindedness. That's how I ended up, after almost 40 years in the industry, completely in the finance industry, that entire time, because I was always curious. And it ended up being, I could say that while I've been in banking, I've been in 15 different careers, whether it was international, whether it was in asset management or treasury management, name it. And I know that Jeneen and Joy know what I'm talking about. Sometimes I think it's really just, it's an umbrella that you hang when you realize that you can retain yourself in the industry because of the diversity of it. But I think the companies, and even if you're an entrepreneur and you're having a startup, it's the same thing, that you have to build that culture. Now more than ever, it's a phenomenal time to be a woman in finance because there's so many support systems. There's employee business resource groups, or if you're not big enough to have one, you share them with others. There's really a lot of focus. There are men as allies groups and I have really believed that my mentors, it was genderless, frankly, because they knew Kay, and they knew my work ethic, and they knew, I didn't expect them to read my mind, so they knew a lot of my goals and frankly what I was interested in. But I think retention is a personal responsibility and a organizational responsibility, and that organization has to really be focused on the culture to make it feel, I think it has to be relevant to women's needs. We can talk about that, whether it's being innovative in reentry programs, whether it's being innovative in a virtual workplace, whatever that means. I think innovation is key to retention.
Thank you, Kay. Jeneen, any thoughts?
I was going to say the other thing too that I think has really helped is really understanding what's top of mind for women. And we do go through a lot of different things, right? You kind of start your career, you get off, you can work a million different hours. And then if you decide that you want to have a family or those types of things, what are the support networks for you as you evolve through your life? So whether or not it's children, no children, whether or not it's partners, no partners. And I think that's one of the things that really, when you think about women's economic power and their ability to help, keep us in the workplace, I think that's one of the catalysts is what do the benefits look like to help support you as you go through a time of need, whether or not you have a loss of a family member, what are some of those benefits to provide you so that you don't feel that you are supported as you go through different things in your life. And I do feel like that's one of the things that really incredible companies have decided to really look and invest on is we are multifaceted. And so I think trying to figure out what those benefits to support us, in addition to the great things that Joy and Kay talked about, is we also need benefits to support us to make sure that if we do need to, take maternity or paternity leave, you can do that without, the fact that you're going to lose momentum. The fact that if, you have, I have an older dad, if I had to take some time to help in those cases, that I have the support behind our organization to do those types of things. So I do think it's kind of looking multidimensional at what your company can provide. And it's also speaking up about some of those benefits and needs that you need as you evolve through your career. And I think that is in moments that matter. I do believe that people get stronger with those organizations, that they are there for them, both personally and professionally. And I think that clearly that was the case for me as I've continued to stay with Bank of America for as long as it's almost been 27 years because of those things. And I think you see that, for Miami alumni, that they're really rich and entrenched with Miami. They had a great experience. And so they are also looking to give back. I know that's why Joy, myself, and Kay are taking the time to, share our personal perspective, because you have a passion behind what you do. So that's one other point that I would say in terms of retention.
Our Miami alum passion is very well known and on full display here this afternoon. And with that, Jeneen, this question is for you. Close on the heels of strategies to attract and retain, and Joy touched on this, just a little hint in her previous response, promotion is the third pillar of a sustainable strategy. Jeneen, based on your experience, what are your observations for opportunities for women in the field of finance?
So I think creating opportunities for teammates to grow and develop is so important. I think part of the ownership is on the organization, and then I think part of the ownership is within yourself and the network that you're starting with. So I would start first with the organization. So I think you have to look at the culture of the organization that you're with. Do you see yourself in other roles? Do you see that they're moving people along? What are the learning tools that they're providing? A fresh college graduate, what does that program look like? What is their retention rate? Do they have a mentorship program? Do they have a tuition reimbursement program so that you can continue to have the opportunity to hone and refine your skills as you are advancing? Because as you take a new role, there may be new, more technical skills you need to develop that maybe you wouldn't get in the workplace, but you need it for, let's just say, accountants, or, you've got something in investment banking, those types of critical skills. I think that those are important things to kind of continue to look at. And then, I think Joy talked on it about the mentorship program, what some of them, and Joy did too, or Kay did too, about there are specific programs within institutions. We have a Lead for Women. We have an LGBT organization. We have an MSAG group. So, there are just a tremendous amount of things depending on your passion, but they are all based on mentorship and development. And so I think that helps. And then, your first entry into managing people, do they have a mentorship and manager program that can help you and know that you're probably going to make mistakes, but ultimately people are there to help provide you guidance so that you can get better and make stronger and better decisions as you move across the organization. So I do feel like that's one of the pieces. And then, as I mentioned, the advocacy for yourself. Promotion isn't just about moving up, but I think sometimes it's lateral changes, moves that you need to make. I know I've had to take a number of lateral moves in order for me to continue to move up, but that gave me more experience, more exposure to different people that could advocate for me. And I think it ultimately made me a better manager because I was learning more about the organization. And sometimes I took opportunities that I didn't think that I would be good at. And that helped push me along too. So don't be afraid to get into places that you're uncomfortable or in unfamiliar territory. I feel like some of those have been the most rewarding. They have also been the most challenging. And so I think that that's a path that I would say, and also, if there is a role that you're really looking for, start to take the time to reach out to those individuals so that when an opportunity does develop or open up, you've already been seeking those things out. So I would say your voice of yourself and the voice within your organization are two things that I would say are really critical pieces. And I'll let Joy and Kay talk a little bit more too about their perspective. But I do feel like career growth, means many different things to many different folks. And also depending on where you are in your career, sometimes you have to say no for now, because maybe I need to learn more in the in the role that I'm in, or I'm not ready to leave the organization that I'm currently with. So I think some of it also comes with really making sure that you've got a good network around yourself, so that when an opportunity does present itself, or you're going after an opportunity, you've got that kind of board of trustees, so to speak, that will help you because they know you well enough to know what your strengths and weaknesses are to help you lead you in the decisions that you're going to make moving forward. But I'll let my peers talk too.
Jeneen, go ahead.
I would say one thing, ask for a promotion. I think I was in a leadership program, like you mentioned, some companies have great leadership programs, and I was in one and met a woman who talked about the art of asking. And one of the women at ERGs I was involved in, they would always push women to say, when you come up to your annual review or your biannual, whatever your company does, ask for something, ask for more money, ask for a promotion, ask for new opportunities. In your conversations with your manager, ask. And I think there's a book, I can't remember the author, but Women Don't Ask. There's one book called that. And then there's another one called The Art of Bragging, Tooting Your Own Horn. And I met the author of that book. And one of the things she said is, alluding back to the Women Don't Ask book, is if you want to get promoted, ask for promotion. But Jeneen, to your point, make sure you're qualified for it. So I think sometimes I've noticed there are some people who are qualified for promotions and don't ask for it, and people who are not qualified for promotions and do ask for it. So just the one key thing I would say is ask, but in that asking, make sure that you're actually qualified for that promotion.
Yeah, good point. I think both Jeneen and Joy, you make me think of a quote that sort of describes what we're talking about here, that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And what that has always spoken to me about is you have to be open and ready. And of course, you can't be ready for everything. I mean, that's just but you really have to be good where you are at that time. You have to be the best. And then you also have to, when people use the phrase continuous learning, that is just it's just a requirement. And that's why being in a finance industry and a career is so incredibly wonderful, because it's a continuous learning. You cannot be a good advisor to your customers. You can't be a good leader. You can't be a good community partner without constantly learning. And so what I'll add to that, what Joy and Jeneen said about investing in yourself, that's really up to you. And you really have to have advocates and be surrounded by relationships. But there's an element that the finance industry is a natural for, and that's community service. And I mean volunteering in your community, because it's very much about changing lives. I mean, it looks, Jeneen said it best, it looks very dry if you haven't entered into it, but it's very much about changing people's lives. And it's, we talk a lot about economic empowerment and about equity in that. And this is really where you can make a distinct difference in your communities in this industry. That being said, I find that part of helping in promotion of yourself inside an organization is that you cannot expect, and probably won't, even with the best organizations, leadership programs or development programs, you can't learn some skills without something outside. And the development that you can gain by serving on a committee or serving on a board is unlimited in its potential. Not only do you meet other people and you learn from them because they're in other industries, but you also learn your own personal leadership skills, and you learn how to manage a bigger part of your life. And it makes it more, I think you're more promotable. It shows that you have a broader wingspan, if you will, and you're the beneficiary always, because I find that I've learn more than I've ever been able to give in any kind of volunteer effort. So I think investing in yourself means inside and outside, and that leads to promoting yourself into what may not be the next. I totally agree with my colleagues here. It's not the ladder, it's the development you have in order to make you even better and better in whatever it is, projects, knowledge, leadership. And I think that's really, if I go back to the very roots at Miami, they were long into multidisciplinary teaching. I mean, I met, we were always on projects together. It was long before that was maybe the mode of learning. Communication was, you had to have communication skills. That was just like, didn't matter what you majored in, you better know how to write and communicate. And it still proves today, I think our new recruits from Miami clearly stand above in that. And that goes all about this promotion and investing in yourself. So thank you, Miami.
What a terrific conversation. The professor and me was taking notes as you were speaking. And some of the things that stand out so far in our conversation is the Liberal Arts Foundation at Miami University. All three of our panelists spoke to this in different ways: the hands-on learning, the communication skills, the continuous learning. These are all very embedded in Miami's liberal arts curriculum. So shout out to Miami. Some of the comments that all three of you made that I captured here is role models matter. Role models matter. There's a diversity of roles within finance. Audience, take note. You may or may not be interested to be an investment banker on Wall Street, and that's okay. That's a great career path, not the only career path. The Farmer School just introduced a major in real estate. And Kay, I think you mentioned real estate as a career track. So there's lots of energy, lots of excitement, and lots of I think, variety of opportunity within the field of finance that I hope our conversation today has triggered some curiosity to learn more about, right? Inclusive organizations. I cannot emphasize how important that is. And each one of our panelists spoke to this in different degrees. Research the culture of the organization, research the supportive nature of the organizations. Don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. I cannot tell you how often I'm uncomfortable as well. Don't be afraid to be uncomfortable, be an advocate for yourself and for others. Some of the key takeaways from our conversation this morning. Before I turn it back over to Kim, Kay, Joy, Jeneen, there's a live audience here waiting with a list of questions. And before they get to jump in, I'm going to turn it back over once more to all three of you. If there's an area we haven't touched on or something you want to expand on, please. Here's an opportunity.
There is, I think what's helpful and I think hopeful is if we look to the future. We're right here and we've talked about progress and we've talked about, I think we all share incredible passion for our careers in finance. And we could have, it could have been 40 minutes of us, I bet we could name in 40 minutes, 40 different career paths, if not more. So that passion is there, but for the future, I think there's a growing trend of overall community awareness. And let me just put it in that big bucket called, corporate social responsibility, or, whether that's in environmental or whether that's in social aspects. And, governments have long had metrics on doing business with diverse companies and having contracts with, minority and women-owned businesses. But there's a growing trend of investors that want to have gender-based investing portfolios. And what it's not meant to be just women or just, this is really about inclusion. I think the exciting part is this covers all the areas of inclusiveness where there is a more broad-based awareness And then I think as we go forward, there'll be more of a broad-based, intentional understanding of the why, as opposed to it looking like a should, need to do. And I think that's what, we have all the statistics that show more diverse companies have better productivity and profitability. And we've been saying that, but I think we are seeing it, and there's going to be some trends that are already well underway that will deliver it, I think, faster than maybe the pace of which finance and the careers have had in the past.
Yeah, I was going to echo. I mean, I could not agree with you more, Kay. I mean, I think we're seeing that. We just published for our second year in a row, a human capital report. So it clearly goes to, right, what do we really look like? Are we really saying and doing what we think is really critical? So we are measuring everything that you can think about: women in leadership, women in board positions, diversity at all levels, retention, promotion, all of those types of things. And then really we're also measuring what you talked about, Kay, with what we call ESG, right? Environmental, social, and governance. People are really, when you think about each of the generations, we are becoming more aware about what companies are doing. Are they engaged in really important matters? And are we driving social and equality changes across the horizon? So do you have sustainable finance? Are you issuing green bonds? What are you doing with climate? What are you doing with, community banking needs? How are you helping those that are in low to moderate income? Are you helping in the arts? Are you helping? So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of economic empowerment in what we're doing in finance. And that's the one thing that I would say is it's bigger than just investment banking or, opening up a checking or a savings account. It is really, it runs the gamut. And if you think about what Joy, myself, and Kay have done, we have done many different roles, and really roles that I would not have thought are traditional to banking. And so, as some of these things that I'm talking about, philanthropic giving, what are we doing with the money that we make? Are we investing it back into our community? Are we empowering our people to volunteer and be part of those boards to make changes? So I think really I would say it's just, it is a tremendous opportunity. And clearly I think it's a great, not only starting point, but really a place for you to end your career and see yourself continuing to evolve. Women in finance, I think clearly was a great opportunity for me. And I never thought that was a door, as both Kay and Joy thought, like I just didn't see myself there. And because I thought it was more stodgy and institutional than it was really, I knew I was passionate about certain things, and I wasn't sure that was something that I'd find in a bank. And clearly it has done that, and even more so. And I believe that I wanted to be part of something different, and I wanted to be part of a change. And I believe that I'm doing that every day by helping those create a better future, and not only for our country and our world, but also for each life that we're touching for the clients, in terms of we're asking clients, what do you want the power to do, right? They own the power. We just have the education, all of us, meaning in all the financial institutions that we work, we have the power to kind of mobilize that capital to allow people to really realize their dreams and their visions. And so I think it does allow that. So hopefully, you'll find inspiration in that piece as well, because I know I did as I kind of moved through my career.
So the one thing I have is there's also women in finance have a unique opportunity to make their way to the C-suite. So I think one amazing thing about being in finance, and I see that in my own organization, and women like Sally Krawcheck, Carla Harris, who's a senior VP at JP Morgan, and just other institutions, if you notice that some of their roles or women are moving into COO roles, CFO roles because of their finance background. And it goes back to having a very broad experience. I think even the CFO of GM, I can't remember, there's one woman, I can't remember her name, I could see her face, but she's like one of the youngest CFOs in the country. And so I would just encourage anyone who's thinking about a career in finance or who's currently in finance to think, oh, it's stodgy, I don't want to work at an investment bank. You don't have to. You can work at or any bank. You can work in finance within an organization, but there's a unique opportunity, I think, for women to make it to the C-suite with a finance background. And I've seen it with, the CFO of Google and even some of the board members of Alphabet, women who were former CFOs. So I would encourage anyone to stay in that field, stay in the field.
Yeah, agree.
Thank you. Well, Kay, Joy, Jeneen, you have our audience all fired up and ready to go. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Kim to moderate the Q&A session. Kim?
Hi, everybody. Yes, such a really good conversation and a lot of good questions here. So like Barnali, I was taking a lot of notes here and trying to put some themes together and try to maybe bring some of our questions together here. So Joy, you talked about the art of asking, and negotiating is really something women in particular, it's not just asking, but then, okay, that promotion's here. What about negotiation? Can you talk a little bit about that and the importance of women being able to negotiate for themselves? And then any little tips that you or any of the other women want to offer?
Yeah, I remember taking a role, and I remember, so I've only been at 3 companies, and I think within Ernst & Young, I moved around quite a bit. So I was able to move around. I think when I first joined, I didn't negotiate my salary. That was a long time ago. I didn't know if I could. I just was happy to get a job. I mean, I'd interned for 3 summers. Miami has a great accountancy program, so it wasn't hard for me to get an internship. It wasn't hard for me to get a job. So I think for the first, I would say the first half of my career, I didn't even think about negotiating salary. I think the first time I thought about it was when I moved, and I was like, oh my goodness, this new city I'm moving to, it's really expensive. They have to give me a cost of living adjustment. And I started learning negotiating skills then, the same when I moved to London and moved back to the country. But I think also when you first take on a new role, that first salary offer that you get, I think there's room for negotiation, and that's a good place to practice your negotiation skills. I think, sometimes you get a job offer and you're just so happy that you got the job that you interviewed for, whether it's finance or any other, function or company or a discipline. But I think one thing I would challenge the audience to do is to ask for more. So, if they're not willing to increase your base salary, what about additional equity? If they can't increase base or equity, what about, flexible work arrangement? I feel like there's ways to negotiate and ask for what you think you need to be successful in your role. And it's not just money. It could be time. It could be, someone mentioned time off to volunteer. We get time off to work, to do volunteer projects. It could be being on a board, a nonprofit board, a for-profit board. So I think asking is part of negotiations. And I think it's something that we should always be trying to do, always asking, and not in an annoying way, like, oh, I want more money, I want more money. No, in a very thoughtful and strategic way that makes sense for your career. I think it's super important to negotiate.
That's great. Anybody else have anything to add to that? That was really good advice, Joy. Thank you. As I mentioned before, we have a lot of students and a lot of parents watching today. So of course, and you've all mentioned internship opportunities that you had when you were Miami students. Can you just talk a little bit about what are some really good internship experiences in particular in the areas of finance, and what are your companies doing? What about these students that are in this COVID era right now? Are your companies offering virtual internships, or are there other ways that they can supplement their learning, especially right now?
I think, well, first of all, I think there's an abundance of resources that sometimes we forget that may be right in front of us. I know Miami has done a really good job in their business school over the years of working with companies, and those companies are really trying to reach into you as students. We followed a lot of the public accounting industry many years ago, almost a decade ago, where we realized that the importance of learning the industry and its, all of its diverse career paths, it was important to go back at least to maybe the sophomore year. So from an internship standpoint, we have an annual internship program. It's competitive, but yet Miami seems to be they fight above their weight class, so to speak. And those interns are meant to be part of the bank at the end of that. It's a test drive, if you will. And everybody that's been an intern or a co-op understands that. But there are organizations on campus. I mentioned this, commercial banking club. There's women in business at the Farmers School, I believe. There's all kinds of opportunities to self-developing. But we have done this year, we did for the first time by design and by necessity, we did all of our internships virtually, and we'll continue to do that. We have our development programs currently. So those that are in their first couple of years of their career, which is another part of development in most organizations, high touch is also being done virtually. So we converted everything we did. We have the same, cross line of business exposure, the same leadership development. It's just doing what we're doing right here, bringing the bank to them wherever their place may be, in their homes or in whatever cities. It's actually been a good. It's actually had some good aspects of it. I mean, it's there's a lot of conversation about the physical workplace, and we've learned a lot from each other about their respective lives, because you have to be a little bit more personal when you're having your Zoom in your own personal space as opposed to the office. I mean, there's just a lot of great benefits. But bottom line is, internships are key. I would highly recommend anybody doing them during their time at Miami. Your contacts will be multiplied before you graduate.
Great.
Yeah, I was going to say we did the same thing. We had roughly 2,000 global interns. They did deliver on specific business content. They had real work assignments. They were able to volunteer, whether or not it was virtually. And as Kay mentioned, it was really that high touch approach too, even though we're kind of in this virtual environment. And I actually think students are very used to this virtual environment, probably more so than probably the workforce itself. So there were a lot of key learnings that I think we got from them in terms of just ideas, enhancements, how to utilize the technology, the infrastructure. We did really look at really making sure that we have a diverse intern class, because we think that that's really important too. So we do measure that too. So like 54% of our interns were people of color, and over 47% were women. So, those are all things that we're continuing to measure too, because we do believe, as both Joy, Kay, and myself have talked about, is that diversity of thought does make meaningful change in the workplace and in the communities that we're serving. So, advancing diverse talent is really important. And we do look at, I think we were recruiting on 350 different campuses. But I do also want to say, I unfortunately, my dad was military. We could not afford for me to do an internship. So I did want to say, listen, sometimes maybe that path from a financial perspective doesn't work for you, but do know that companies understand. I'm one of 5 children when we were growing up. My dad was in the military. We moved every other year. College was the longest I lived anywhere before I came to Bank of America. So I do want to say, internships are very, very important, but I would also say, I think that companies are also looking for people that really have a hard work ethic, are really going to kind of roll up their sleeves. So don't feel like if your family or, you just don't have the means to be able to do it, that isn't something that is going to hold you back. I think companies recognize that, particularly times are tough. And so it may not be feasible for you to take an internship, or for parents to take on that financial burden too, to have you live in another city or another place, because maybe you can make more money, unfortunately, at a restaurant. I'm not today, but in other times. So, that was my track. I would have loved to have done an internship. It just didn't work out, being the oldest of 5, to be able to do that. I would say it was a little bit different than, my youngest sister, but for me, it just didn't work out that way. But I don't think it held me back. So I do want people to feel like a company isn't going to hold you back just because you can't do those types of things.
Okay. I think that's really good advice. And, you know, as I said before, we have a wide range of people on here. So we have our students, but we have our alumni and parents here, and some of our different phases of their employment stage right now. You know, unfortunately, where we currently are in the economy, women are leaving the workforce at a much higher rate than men. You know, and maybe that's a permanent loss, but some might want to go back in. So just kind of thinking about your advice to make sure people know that you are a hard worker, you know, that you've got these skills. What kind of tips do you have maybe for somebody to grow a network? You know, if you're not currently in the workplace, or, you know, how do you put yourself out there and start making some of those connections when you're looking for the job? And then I think it's important if you're new, where do you find those mentors? Maybe from some of your own experience, you could talk about the opportunities you sought out or saw some good examples of that. Right?
I would say, well, one area that is probably, I'm sure everyone is aware of, is LinkedIn. And I know LinkedIn can be a little weird when you have strangers reaching out to you, or you feel weird reaching out to a stranger. But I think if you start with one, look who's in your network, right? We're all Miami alumni. Miami has a great network. So start with your alma mater. If you also think about your high school, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I went to Walnut Hills. My grandmother went to Walnut Hills. Like, Walnut Hills has a deep network. And so I also keep in touch with a lot of my classmates. Like I mentioned, I went to Miami with actually two of my best friends from Walnut Hills. And so I would almost start there. I start with like my natural friend circle. Then I think about my networks. It doesn't have to be cold like LinkedIn. You could also, you know, start with warmer networks. If you're out of the workforce, you always have a high school friend or a college friend that you can reach out to who may know someone, and start that from like warm introductions. Or, you know, we mentioned volunteer work. If you've done any volunteer work, that's another easy connection. There are multiple ways to stay connected. It doesn't have to just be LinkedIn. And I think people discount their own network. Even family can be a network. My younger brother works for KPMG. He's a director there. Very proud of him, so I like to brag on him. He is a great network for me. He's a great networking resource. We are networking resources for each other. So when people reach out to me about public accounting, I actually send them to my brother, because he's in public accounting. So don't discount, you know, your immediate circles or some circles that you made over. Don't discount that. You don't have to go right to reaching out to a stranger. You can go to a warmer introduction or connect.
That's great advice.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree too. I mean, I feel like there are, Joy just really, I think, hit all the major points. I feel like don't be afraid to, and I think she might have mentioned it too, don't be afraid to ask. Like, ask for an introduction. If Joy happens to know somebody, or I happen to know somebody, it's hard to recruit sometimes really good talent that you might be looking for. And maybe there's a specific need or specific ask that the organization needs. And, you know, recruiters really are looking for people that, you know them. So I do feel like those natural introductions are really important. And I know sometimes you just take for granted some of those things, family members, LinkedIn. But I think today's technology, it allows you to see so much more, and you may not realize that you have connections at certain organizations, which is so cool to be able to see, and how deep and how broad, you know, some of the Miami connections have gone. There are many people that are working in so many different industries that you may be interested, or maybe there's a location that you're really interested in moving your family to. So maybe it's not just about the job. Maybe it's about the location, just you want to get closer to family. And so you're willing to take a different type of change or direction. I think that network is so broad and vast. And you just have to keep working at it too. That's the other thing that I would say, is don't get down on it. Just continue to keep being resourceful and keep at it. And don't be afraid if somebody doesn't respond right away. Sometimes it just might be, unfortunately, they're so busy with what's happening. Just reach out again. Don't feel like you're being annoying. I feel like sometimes, somebody has to reach out to me twice sometimes in order for me to like, oh, it's really important. I got to move on it. Just because unfortunately everybody has different priorities or something personally might be happening. So that's the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to kind of go back at the person 1 or 2 or 3 different times to reapproach them.
I can't agree more. I think this is exactly what Joy and Jeneen said are exactly what I recommend. I always think of yourself in, you have different pots where you have seeds, and wherever you have a seed, you have family, you have Miami alum, we have, and sometimes I think if you maybe out of the workforce or people are looking for something that may be a big change that, they might feel like I don't have any, but the contexts are endless. And I think more than ever, just like participating in virtual meetings is very comfortable, and sometimes you have more participation. I'm sure there's more people on this Miami call than there may be at the Mercantile Library, but the point of it is it's an era where it's more natural. And I was just smiling, thinking on all these ideas of connection bombarded. They talked about the CFO going to the C-suite. Well, one of the greatest, friends of mine, a Miami alum, was a CFO of Synergy and is now the CEO of Duke Energy, the largest energy company in the world and U.S. Then I was just thinking, well, wait a minute. I just know, the CEO of the Museum Center in Miami alum asked for me to reach out to somebody in Columbus for her spouse. I don't know him, but I have people that I know in Columbus that are in his industry, and it was all a Miami connection. Now, I'm not saying everything has to be Miami, but if you just have one connectivity, the connectivity is endless just with Miami alum. And so tap into all the things that Joy and Jeneen said, friends, and then people in the community are very open. They know you in a different way. They know you may be a CFO or a banker, but they know your work ethic, and they are phenomenal contacts through your volunteer efforts.
Thanks, Kay. And what a timely comment you just made, because I do have a comment in here from Elizabeth Pierce, the CEO of the Cincinnati Museum Center and Miami alumna, who just said she wanted to point out that women in finance have made restoration of a National Historic Landmark possible, the Cincinnati Union Terminal, with PNC and B of A and Jill Breckmeyer. So she says hello. Thank you.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Those organizations and networks, personal networks, so key. And thank you all for illustrating that so much. A question came in: are there any professional organizations that you would recommend somebody get into to, again, kind of help grow that network, help grow, finance specific organizations, especially if someone's at a small firm that maybe can't offer some of the enrichment that the larger companies can offer? So, Jeneen, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, some of the ones that I started to join when I first got out of college, and even organizations, like if you don't have as many deep resources, I'd start with a nonprofit, organization, one that you're passionate about, and 2, usually there's developmental things within that organization that can help you grow. And they usually have a lot of opportunity. So that's one of the things that I would mention. I would also say there's also virtual things that you can do. So, as Joy mentioned about LinkedIn, there are virtual, things that you can do, either classes that you can take on LinkedIn that will help kind of put you in different networking groups. So maybe liked interests and things like that are out there. So I would start there. Those are a couple of my suggestions.
Okay. Any others out there?
Depending on what community you're in, there's also natural organizations. They would be community or not. They can be nonprofits. But I'm thinking of things like chambers of commerce. They typically are focused on a wide variety of members: small business, mid-sized, large corporate, and there's a lot of leadership and training and development in those kinds of organizations. I think the LinkedIn training and the virtual training. Now, if you would have some natural network, the webinars are endless and abundant. Mm-hmm. But I look at something like, going back to Jeneen's comment about boards. I look at, for instance, Elizabeth Pierce's board at the Museum Center, and it is so full of incredible professionals in just about every industry you could think of, leading a great, great organization, and you think if you just had one of those phone calls or one of those, outreach, to ask them about something specifically that they're involved in that could be meaningful. I think that it's just this incredible quilt of people that you can build, that you have to just kind of build your own personal development plan through those contacts.
Okay, great.
And there's one, Kim, I would plug. Sorry, I was looking down. I couldn't remember the name of it. I could only remember the acronym FEI. It's the Financial Executives International. So I'm part of it here in the Bay Area, and they have great trainings, people from all different types of companies in finance, controllers, VPs, accountants. So that's also going back to the other comment about coming back into the workforce. That is one organization you can look into in your area to just create new connections, and also great for career development as well and networking.
Great. So one of the reasons we had this panel, we mentioned Walter Frank beforehand. Walter is a retired Merrill Lynch financial advisor. And he said, the investment advisory business was very male dominated. He didn't feel the culture then was helpful in recruiting and retaining women, and even turned off a lot of women. And so we've talked a lot today about the changes that your organizations are starting to make to make finance a much more welcome area for women, a place where women can grow. But the big question that I'd like each of you to answer is, what can we do better? What can we do better, individually? What can we do better for the organizations we work with? So we'll leave that as our last big question that I'll give to each of you. And Joy, can I start with you?
Yeah, I was trying to think what can we do better. So I think personally, like I mentioned, family being a good network. I also think encouraging some of my younger cousins and nieces, nephews, and just even people in the community, encouraging them to go into finance. I think, I eventually went to law school, and for some people that's like natural, like, oh, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor. But I think having the conversations about consider a career in finance. I wish I could go back to Miami now. There's a real estate major. I would have totally loved, I would love to go back to school and be a real estate major. But thinking of like individually, I think we've all mentioned just being resources for our community, but I think also for our family and friends. And then I think organizations, going back to Jeneen made a point about what resources are available at companies to retain women. I think companies having programs or having benefits around taking time off during COVID to take care of family, taking time off to take care of unwell relatives, whether it's your parents or another type of dependent, depending on where you are in your life. So I think companies can look at their benefits, and then I think individually we can just continue to encourage women to come into the field.
Great, thank you. Okay.
I think Walter, thank you very much. You've been probably one of the best Miami alumni that we could think of. You've lived and breathed that love and honor as long as I've known you. So thank you. And you bring up a really good point. I think the pace of which women are going to be in finance will be very accelerated. If nothing more, I think there's a growing awareness of the financial responsibilities that women have, either in their households or in their respective organizations. And I started off earlier today when I said how much of the decisions, financial decisions, investment decisions, household decisions financially are made by women, and it's the majority. And so if we don't meet our customers where they are, or look like our customers, or feel welcoming as an employer, and we don't do as well. And clearly, I think we see a tremendous amount of interest in our personal side of banking, the wealth management, the investment management side, where women want to deal with women financial advisors, and they are, it is a growing. Oftentimes we're asked that. We even have a women business advocacy training so that there is an understanding of perhaps how women make decisions, and being able to provide that from just a training and development standpoint. But I think it is probably, in my feeling right now, you look forward, I would say the next 10 years, that area of finance that Walter recognized is probably one of the biggest growth areas that women will be in, and should really, really consider. It's a wonderful, wonderful, strong career path.
Great. Jeneen, we'll wrap with you.
Yeah, I don't have much more to say than what Kay and Joy talked about. I mean, it really is all of those things they said. And then I honestly just, again, would say it's just getting into the field, really making sure that we recruit more heavily. And that's on the university, that's on us as organizations that are, I do believe the needs, as Joy stated, some really incredible facts, right? Those decisions, that earning power is really important. And so we have a responsibility to recruit and retain at all levels. So all the way up to the C-suite. So how do we continue? Because we still do see at that middle level where women make a decision to leave the workforce, just given the amount of pressure. And this year alone is probably one of the most intense that we've seen for women. I know all of us in our organizations are doing a lot to really try to understand. I mean, nobody in our history has ever had to teach at home, right? Their children are at home. You can see them on conference calls coming in. I mean, dogs barking, children, you name it, it's happening. And you're still trying to drive a business and take care of our clients. So, I mean, I just think we are learning so much today, and really trying to make sure that we are alleviating people's fear, particularly in our field, to say, it's okay to take a moment to leave and go take care of, if so-and-so's got to get on a Zoom call for reading and you've got to do that, then you're going to have to do it. We'll talk about X, Y, and Z later. I do feel like both our clients as well as the business we're running, we do know that the needs are just so different. And that's for all parents. So it's not just women, but I would say parents in general, attracting and keeping that talent right now. We're all being challenged on how do we do it more effectively, and where people feel comfortable that they can say, I can't take this meeting right now. Like, I have a crisis going on with my kids in the other room, whatever it might be. I do feel like that's attracting and keeping our talent is a really important part. And it's at all levels. But particularly, I would say middle management to high level management is where we're most challenged as we get people through maybe a really tough time that they're going through, whether or not it might be family or whatever, to know that they can make it to that next level and we'll support them. Yeah. And they do have that parachute behind them that we will be there. So I feel like that is one of the critical pieces we need to continue to look for as a workforce, is how do we continue to sustain that?
Okay. Well, I think that was a great discussion, and we had a lot of great answers and thoughtful questions and from our audience here. So I hope that we have a better understanding of these issues and how we can deal with them. Barnali, as our moderator, any last comment you want to give as we wrap up here?
A million ideas. I'll keep it brief. Wow. Attract, retain, promote. We just spent 75 minutes. 75 minutes. It went by so fast on a wide-ranging discussion on this important topic that could not be more timely. I hope this discussion has generated thoughtful ideas and a better understanding of the path forward. I know that I learned and heard so many ideas to share with students. A huge round of virtual applause for our panelists and our audience, both absolutely critical to the success of this event. Heartfelt thank you. And now back to you, Kim.
Yes, and I echo everything Barnali said. Thank you all so much for your time today. I know that some of you, because we are busy women, have hard stops at 1:30 to hop off here. So I just want to say thank you so much, Jeneen, Kay, and Joy, for joining us today. If you need to go ahead and jump off here, but if you wanted to have your chance to say goodbye to everybody, I do have a few housekeeping notes that I will go ahead and get into. But again, thank you so much for joining us today and for your insights. It's really, really appreciated. It's a good conversation. So I hope that if you were watching today, you enjoyed this as much as I did. We have several webinars coming up here that we're sponsoring through the Alumni Association on different topics, and you can check those out at our website. It's alumlc.org/MiamiOH. And so that has a list of all of our upcoming events that we have online that are open to Miamians across the country. Current students, faculty, staff, and parents, please join us. I also wanted to let you know about the Miami Initiative for Advancing, Mentoring, and Investing in Women, known as Miami Women. Seem very timely with our topic here today. Miami Women, is a university-wide initiative that works with alumni and campus offices and student groups to encourage and support students and opportunities for women. So we have regional events with Miami Women, there's a giving circle, and we have an annual Hawk Tank and Women's Symposium. So you can learn more about all of these great activities and join the giving circle at the URL listed here on your screen, miamialum.org/MiamiWomen. Thank you again so much for joining us today, and a big thank you to our moderator and panelists again for their time and expertise. Have a great day, everybody. Love and honor.